I'm excited where we've been over the last couple weeks. Last time, just really quick, I guess, announcement in the way. I told you guys last week to pray for me that I was running a triathlon yesterday. And so as you can see, I did not drown. And so that's a good thing. And so I finished. It wasn't great, but I finished, and that was the goal, to finish and not finish last. And I accomplished both of my goals. So we're good. All right. And so this morning, as we go into this series, or been in this series called Moving Forward, talking about what it looks like for us as a church as we move forward. A couple months ago, about a month ago, we made this announcement that we were going to be moving to our own building, and that we had a building, and we voted as a church to move forward with that, and things are moving, right? I met with the architect this week, and they're about 50% done with our drawings, and so the drawings will be done here in the next week and a half, and they'll go in for permitting, and we'll get permits, and demo of the building that I told you guys about, that's happening in the next 2 weeks. And so there's some things that are going to be happening, like the community has seen the sign that we put up that says coming soon CityPlace Church, but soon this building is going to be knocked down, and it's going to start creating some buzz, I think, in the community. So things are moving forward with the building. Each week I'll probably give you guys an announcement to let you know where we're at, and so I'm excited about it, right? But as we're in this series and we're talking about it, what it looks like for us as a church to move forward, I want us to think about what it looks like for us to move forward as individuals. For us to move forward as individuals, right? And so here's this idea, is that 2 weeks ago we told you that, listen, our purpose as a church is to give people a place, or we belong to give people a place to belong and to connect and to grow. That's who we are as a church, that we want to make sure that this is a place that you feel like you can belong, that this is a place that you feel like you can connect, that this is a place where you feel like you can grow, not only in relationship with one another, but more importantly in your relationship with the Father, with God Himself. That you can belong, that you can connect, and that you can grow in Him. And last week, I told you about what it looked like for us to be consistent. And that over the next couple weeks, as we unpack and look at what our core values are, our first core value is consistency. That we want you to develop consistency in your relationships, not only with one another, but your relationship with God Himself, that there's consistency there. Whether that's in the way that you read the Scriptures, whether that's in the way that you have your prayer life, and the way that you do the things that you do, that as you grow each and every day, hopefully in your relationship with God, that there is consistency there. And that we have consistency with one another in our relationships with each other. And so today we're going to be looking at our second core value. Our second core value is honesty. And so I ask you the question this morning, what does it mean to be open, honest, and real? For those students that are with us, that were part of my youth group at Fuel and came with me as a student pastor that I was for them for years, we would talk about constantly about being open, being honest, and being real. Anytime before we made a big trip, anytime before we headed off to camp, anytime that we were going to do a retreat or something like that, I would always tell them before we loaded up in the vans or the bus, whatever we were taking, hey, listen, this week, be open, honest, and real. With yourself, with others, but most importantly with God. And so what does it mean for us to be open, honest, and real? Our second core value is honesty. And I'm not talking to you about honesty from the standpoint that I hope that you always walk around telling the truth, which I do. I hope that you aren't a compulsive liar where everything that comes out of your mouth is a lie, right? But I do want you to tell the truth. But when I talk about honesty today, I'm talking about it in the standpoint of openness. That there is a certain level of honesty about ourselves. There's a certain level of openness about ourselves. Maybe a churchy word would be the word transparency. That we have a certain level of transparency about our lives, that we are open, honest, and real with ourselves and with other people about what's going on in our lives. And so what does it really mean for us to be open, honest, and real? One of the ways that I often think about it is the standpoint of I say, hey, how are you doing? And you say, I'm good. And then you have the follow-up question to go, no, how are you really doing? And very often, if you ask the follow-up question, most of the time, the person that you asked will sigh, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. Our initial reaction is to always say that we're good. Our initial reaction is to always say, I'm fine, because we don't want to be a burden. We don't want to be a bother, whatever it may be. Our initial reaction for most of us is to say that I'm good. This week I had dinner with somebody here from the church, and on Tuesday I asked them, hey, how are you doing? And they said, I'm good. And I go, no, how are you really doing? And they go, I'm exhausted. And they go, okay, well, let's talk about why you're exhausted. I mean, I know why you're exhausted, but let's talk about it. And so it's just that idea of when we talk about being open, honest, and real, what does it look like for us to have a certain level of honesty and transparency about our lives? So that when someone says, hey, how are you doing? And we give the standard, I'm okay, when we're really not. And they have the follow-up question, that we can have a deep enough relationship with that person that we can open up a little bit about the things that are happening in our lives. So honesty today isn't about the idea of you always walking around telling the truth, which I hope is what you do anyways. But it's more about us having this level of openness in our life. Because here's this idea, that when we have a certain level of openness and honesty in our lives, most importantly with the Father, and second of all with each other, there's a freedom in that. If I walk around all the time carrying my own burdens and carrying my own fears and carrying my own worries and carrying all of these things that are happening in my life, and I never once open up about things, there is a burden with that. But when I give that to the Father, when I give that and I have a good friend that I can sit down with and say, man, I'm struggling today, this is what's happening, there's a freedom in that. But balance in that is key. But there's got to be a certain balance to our openness. There has to be a certain balance to our honesty and our openness with one another. Not necessarily with God, because He already knows what's in your heart anyways, but with one another. Because typically for most of us, we're in one of two camps. And I always like to do this. I like to play two different sides of the spectrum, but there's one side of the camp that doesn't open up to anybody. I'm closed off. I don't share my heart. I don't share my mind. I don't fear nothing. I don't worry nothing. I'm not scared about nothing. I don't have any struggles. I'm good. Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. I just carry it on myself. I keep to myself. I deal with my emotions all in my own body and in my own heart, my own mind. Like, I don't need to talk to anybody, Pastor. I'm good. I'm good. And almost in a way, we're over here, we isolate ourselves, right? We isolate ourselves. And to the point where isolation, by the way, is not a good place to be. Satan does some bad things when you are isolated from people. And so we're over here, we isolate ourselves, we don't open our hearts, we don't say anything, we don't share nothing. We're just this closed off, cold person who just, hey, I deal with it all on myself. I used to be that person. Everything in my heart and everything in my mind, I just dealt with myself. I would unplug, as I would call it, from my family. I would unplug from everybody, and I would just deal with these own thoughts and these own fears and these own worries in myself. And Kim would say, hey, it's been about 36 hours. Where are you at and what are you doing? And I would just unplug from it, and I would just find myself in this isolated place trying to deal with my own thoughts and my own fears. This is one camp. The other camp is anything that has 2 feet and a breath, you will tell them how you were doing, right? If somebody says, hey, how are you doing? You're like, right? Yeah, oh man, you just don't understand what's happening in my life. My world's falling apart, this, that. And you have this long list of things that is wrong and everything in your life is falling apart. And it's not just to a key person or two, but it's literally to everybody that says, hey, how are you doing? You walk by a stranger on the street and they're like, hey, how are you? And you're like, oh, let me tell you about my life right now. It's a mess. And then the next time they see you coming, they're like, oh crap, there they are, right? And they go the other direction. Or your name pops up on their phone and they're like, maybe you've done this, because I have, I'm guilty. I just don't have the energy today. Like someone's name pops up and you're like, I don't know that I can do it today. Right? So you're in one of two camps. You're over here where you're completely closed off and you don't open up, you don't share, you're not open, honest, and real about anything, not even with yourself. Or you're over here where you just pour your heart out to everything that has 2 feet and a breath. And you wear people out. So we've got to have some balance. We've got to have some balance in who we're open with, who we're honest with, who we're real with. There has to be a balance in the way that we do that. Because we don't want to wear everybody out. We don't want to be the person that when they see you coming at Walmart, they duck down an aisle real quick so they don't have to talk to you, right? We don't want to be that person. But we don't want to be the person over here, I promise you, because it's almost as unhealthy, if not more unhealthy, to be the person over here who doesn't open up and share about anything. Like if you don't have at least one person in your life, whether it's your spouse or a friend or somebody that you can talk to about the things that are going on in your heart and your mind, that's not healthy. But one of the things that as we look at today, here's this idea for me, is that honesty or openness, I believe, starts in our prayer life. That honesty and openness starts with our prayer life. And when we were putting the core values together of the church, and I was working my way through them and trying to figure them out, and we got to this particular one, initially it was going to be transparency, because I wanted us to be transparent with one another. But most people on the street that have never walked into church a day in their life, if you ask them, hey, what do you think transparency means? They probably think you're going to the doctor like for an x-ray film or something, right? Most people outside the walls of the church don't really know when we say, hey, let's be transparent with one another, what that means. And so we switched it to honesty. But I really truly believe that this honesty or this openness that we're talking about today begins with our prayer life. And so in the story today that we're going to be looking at, it's going to be a story that maybe some of you are familiar with, and it's not even really a story, it's an event that's happened. Some of you be familiar with it. If you're not, I'll set it up for you. But we're going to be in the book of Mark today. So if you have your Bibles or your phones or whatever, your devices, whatever you're using, to open them up, turn them on, whatever you need to do. But we're going to be in Mark chapter 14. If not, it'll be on the screens for you. And I've shared this with you before as you're turning there, but Mark is my favorite of the four Gospels. I love Mark. It's a shorter book. It's kind of straight to the point. I love the book of Mark. Matthew is great, and Luke is great, and John is wonderful, but I just really love the book of Mark. It's my favorite of the four Gospels. And in the story that we're looking at today, we're going to see Mark's account of this story that many of us may be familiar with. It's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so if you have your Bibles, I want us to look at verse 32, starting in verse 32. As the story begins to unfold, Jesus, there's this plot to kill Jesus. Judas has decided that he's going to turn Jesus in for some silver, that he's going to turn him in. And so there's all this happening in Jesus' life to the point that Jesus is realizing that his time on earth is coming to an end and that he's being deceived, and all this is happening. He's had the Last Supper. He's done all these things with the disciples, and he heads out to the Garden of Gethsemane with his disciples. And let's look in verse 32. And it says, they went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. And he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch. And going a little further, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible that this hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. And he came and he found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. And the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And he again went away and he prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found them sleeping. For their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came to a third time, and he said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. So Jesus is beginning to, it's at the end of about the time for Jesus to be arrested. He understands and he is beginning to be burdened by what he is ultimately called to. That his ultimate mission was to come to earth and to die for our sins and to be crucified and 3 days later come back to life. But he knows the pain that he is about to endure. He understands what's about to happen, and he heads out to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is at the base of the Mount of Olives. Gethsemane means oil press, because they would press the oils there at that time, or press the olives to get the oil and things that they would use. And so he's there in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he probably often went to pray. And it says that he took his disciples with him. And he leaves his disciples at one spot and he says, "Sit here while I pray." And then it says that he takes Peter, James, and John a little bit further into the garden. And he tells them, "I want you to sit here. I want you to pay attention. I want you to watch over. I want you to pray while I go and pray." And he gives his disciples, Peter, James, and John, he gives them these very strict instructions. And then it says he goes just a little bit further. But what I love about this idea and where I see in Jesus' life is it says, he tells his disciples that my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch. And going a little bit further, it says he fell on the ground. And he began to pray. Jesus falls on the ground. His heart is burdened. He's overwhelmed in the moment. Anybody ever been overwhelmed, right? Jesus is overwhelmed by the moment. He's 100% God and 100% man. But in this moment, he's overwhelmed. He knows that he's about to be crucified. He understands that he's about to die for the world's sin and take all of the sin on him. And the burden is heavy. The burden is heavy. And it tells us, he tells his disciples that I am sorrowful even to death. And he walks just a little bit further and it says that he falls. And he begins to pray. It's kind of, in this weird way, I'm encouraged by the story. Because it shows me that Jesus was worried. That Jesus was overwhelmed. That Jesus understood what was about to happen to him. And he asked specifically if the cup or if this hour could pass from him. If there was anything else that could be done. Like, God, is there another way than for me having to die for the entire world and give my life for the entire world? Can you take this cup from me? In just that moment. But then out of the next breath, he says, but not my will, but your will. Because he knew ultimately what he was here for. But there's this honesty and there's this openness to Jesus in this moment that I believe that he is setting an example for us of how we should live our lives and how we should follow. Because Jesus understands that honesty and openness starts with our prayer life, and this is exactly what he's doing. It doesn't tell us that at the Last Supper he sits down and pours his heart out to his disciples and tells them how scared he is and how worried he is and he doesn't know what's going to happen and how is God going to deliver me from this and I don't know what's going to happen in this. It doesn't tell us that. Jesus gave hints and told them that his time was coming and that the hour was before them and all these things were going to happen. He let them know what was about to happen, but for what was in his heart and what was in his mind, he took that to the Father. And so honesty and openness to me starts with our prayer life. Mark tells us, I'm losing my voice for some reason. Mark tells us that Jesus fell. And it makes me wonder, it makes me, right? I'm only going to talk about myself, and if it applies to you, great. If it doesn't, then that's okay too. But it tells us that Jesus fell. That he was that burdened, that he was that overwhelmed by what God was doing or what was about to happen to him, that he fell. And he just began to pray. And it makes me take a look at my own life and go, when was the last time that I just fell before God? Like, I pray often in my car and I pray often in the moment. Somebody may text me, hey, can you pray for me? And I'll stop right there in that moment and I'll pray for them for 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds, a couple minutes, whatever it may be. I pray in the morning before I leave. I pray with my wife over the phone sometimes as we're going to, she's heading to work. Like I pray a lot, but when's the last time that I just kind of fell on my face and just began to pray because I was so worried and so burdened? Jesus sets that example for us in this scripture. I mean, if I asked you right now, if I passed around a piece of paper and I said, hey, if you would just write down the top 5 things that you're worried about, I'm guessing that all of us would be able to write all 5 things pretty quickly. Right? I mean, if you're here this morning, you're like, man, I got no worries and I got no troubles and I got no struggles. That's amazing. But for most of us, if I said, hey, write the top 5 things that you're worried about, we could write 5 things down pretty quickly. Between jobs and money and finances and kids and college and tuition and homework, and like we could write 5 things down pretty quickly. But it tells us that Jesus just fell and he just began to pray and he began to ask for the cup to be taken from him. He says, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will. So in this moment, Jesus is being transparent. He's open and honest and real with the Father, with what's on his heart and what he's burdened by and what he's struggling with. And out of the same breath of saying, hey, will you take this cup from me? He comes back and says, hey, not my will, but your will be done. When's the last time we prayed that? When's the last time that we prayed, God, hey, I'm burdened and I'm struggling and I don't know what's going to happen and I don't know what the outcome's going to be and I don't know what to do here and I don't know if we're going to be able to find a house or find a job or get this or make tuition this semester or finish my homework, whatever. I don't know. But your will be done and not mine. Like Kim and I are getting ready to move, right? Our lease is up on the house that we rent, and we need a bigger place. We need 4 bedrooms, not 3 bedrooms, because our kids are on top of each other, and it's not a good situation, and so they need some separation. And so we're trying to find a 4-bedroom house. And we've been looking for about a month and a half now. And to the point that we narrowed it down to a group of houses, and Kim took a day off from work on Thursday, and we drove around Lakeland for 5 hours. We looked at 7 houses. It was insane. North Lakeland, South Lakeland, North Lakeland, South Lakeland, North Lakeland, South Lakeland. Like we were all over the place. And we finally settled on a house Thursday. We're ready to make a decision. We're done looking. I'm tired of being on Zillow.com every night, right, looking for houses. And so we're going to make a decision. And so we make a decision Thursday night. But then neither one of us could sleep, but neither one of us knew that the other couldn't sleep because we were awake at different times because we were burdened by the decision that we thought that we had made on Thursday. And so we wake up Friday morning, we're both exhausted, we're both tired, and she's like, how'd you sleep? I'm like, not good. How'd you sleep? Not good. Well, we should have woke each other up. Maybe we could have talked about what was going on. And I go, I don't think we're supposed to choose this house. I think we're supposed to choose this other house that we had kind of scratched off the list. She's like, you too? Man, we should have woke each other up. We could have got some sleep. It's got a fenced-in yard, which would be great for our dogs because we got a boxer and he needs a lot of room to run. And so it's got a fenced-in yard. We started making all the reasons why this house would be okay. But we've been burdened by it. And so we make a decision Friday as she's driving to Tampa. We're on the phone. I'm like, cool, I'm going to call the property management company. I'm going to bring our application done. Woo, we're finished. So I call the landlord or the property management company and I say, hey, listen, we're excited. We're choosing this house and we love it. We've made a decision. This is where we want to go. If you can please just let me know if the owners will let us have our larger dog. I know you said our small dog was good. If we can have our large dog, that would be great. He said, man, I got bad news. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the wife and the husband who own the home live in Sarasota. They've been back and forth about whether they will let you have your larger dog or not. And so now they've just decided no pets at all because they can't make a decision about your larger dog. So now they've just made a decision no pets at all. Like if you ever got off the phone or had a conversation with someone and you were just completely defeated and disappointed, like that was Friday morning. I'm like, man, we've been looking. So I call Kim. I'm like, hey, quit filling out the application. And I share all of that to say this, not my will, but your will. It's not meant for us to be in that house. We thought it was. We like it. We think it's perfect for us, but as of right now, it's not God's will for us to be there. And so as we pray and as we seek things and as we're thinking through things, Jesus is burdened in this moment. God, take this cup from me. Can this hour pass from me? But not my will, but your will. And then Jesus goes back to find his disciples sleeping. And it sounds like, I don't know from you guys, but the way that I read it, it sounds like Jesus is a little frustrated, right? Like, could you not just stay up 1 hour? Could you not just watch and pray for 1 hour? Like, that's what I've asked you to do. I mean, the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. I think that there would be some frustration. It sounds like to me that there's frustration in Jesus' voice in this moment. And so he addresses the disciples, and it says that he went again and he prayed, saying the same words. So he goes off into the garden. He prays for a moment. He comes back. His disciples are sleeping. He addresses the fact that they're sleeping instead of praying. And it says that he goes back and he prays the same words again. God, take this cup from me. Not your will, but my will. And then it says that he comes back again and they're sleeping. And he goes off. And he comes back a third time and they're still sleeping. How many times did Jesus go to the Father in this moment? 3 times? The honesty and openness that he's showing in his life. The honesty and the openness that he's showing us. Yeah. The honesty and the openness that he's showing us. The example that he is setting for us is that he didn't just go to the Father once. He went to the Father multiple times, praying the same thing. So often in our lives, as we are being open and honest and real, we'll pray about something one time, and if God doesn't answer our prayer, we move on. The other day, I was all burdened about something and upset about something, and have you ever had like an angry prayer to God? Like, I don't understand why this is happening. Oh, right? I don't get this. Help me. Right? Excuse me, guys. I don't understand why this is happening to me, and I don't get this, and all this stuff. And then right as I got done with this angry prayer, God comes back and goes, well, you don't have what you're asking for because you haven't been praying for it. Ouch. Right? So Jesus goes back, not once, not twice, but 3 times, praying the same prayer because he's so burdened, he's so honest, he's open, he's transparent with the Father. And so as we think through that, he sets the example for us that it's not just once, it's not just twice, but we got to keep going back to the Father because there's a certain level of honesty and openness that starts in our prayer life. And then as we think about what it looks like, how does it apply to us? How do we take what we see here? As we see what Jesus is doing, how do we take that and apply that in our own lives? That when we are honest and when we are open and when we have a certain level of honesty and openness with the Father and with other people, it does some things in our lives. One of the first things that it does is, I believe this, is that honesty and openness will enhance your relationships. That honesty and openness will enhance your relationships. It's the first thing that it'll do. Think about it. Those people that you're the closest with, those people that you feel like you could go and be open and honest and real with, and you could share your heart, your relationship is better when you're both honest with one another. Like if there's a struggle or there's some hard feelings or something there, that when we're open and honest and real and we share those struggles and we share that burden, and then that openness happens, then there's usually reconciliation that happens in that. But a lot of times we just hold on to our feelings and they hold on to their feelings, and then the relationship isn't enhanced, the relationship is hurt. But when there's an open and an honesty about ourselves, when there's an open and honesty about what's happening in our lives, I believe it will enhance your relationship not only with one another, but with the Father himself. That if we're open and honest and real, because here's the idea, guys, God already knows what's on your hearts. So why not share it with him? So honesty and openness will enhance your relationships. The second thing is honesty and openness will take your relationships to a deeper level. Honesty and openness will take your relationships to a deeper level. If you find yourself in a position where your prayer life is getting stronger because you're spending more and more time with God and you're praying more and more about the things that are on your heart, you begin to discover some things about God and his character that you may not see when you don't spend time with him. So if you are open and honest and real and you're pouring your heart out to him and you're sharing some things with him and you're doing that not only with God but even with some other people, then it's going to deepen your relationships with one another. Some of the deepest relationships I have are because we're open and honest and real with one another. The other day I had a friend that I was really burdened by something, and I've been burdened for months. That I needed to talk to them, but I didn't want to because it was going to be awkward. And how will they react? And what will they say? And what if they don't react the way that I want them to? What if it causes further division in our relationship? I don't know if I should do it. I don't know if I should do it. And I reached out to a mentor of mine and said, man, I don't know what I should do. And they go, you should go talk to them. Oh, I knew you were going to say that, right? And I go and talk to the person. And as soon as I told them how I felt, they go, I feel the exact same way. And it was like, oh, you do? Okay, well, let's talk about that. So honesty and openness will deepen your friendships. It will deepen or send your friendships or your relationships to a deeper level. The third thing is I believe that honesty and openness will instill hope in others. Have you ever thought about from the standpoint of what's happening in your life? The struggles that you have, the things that you're burdened with right now, the things that are going wrong in your life, the things that you think you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel and you don't know what's happening, how somebody else is probably going through the exact same thing or maybe going through the exact same thing, and the way that you handle it and the way that you keep your faith and the way that you see God at the end of it, that somehow that's going to empower them and help them get through the same thing. Countless stories for myself, probably countless stories for you, I hope, of where you're like, man, I've been through this or I've been through that, or man, Kim and I are going through this right now and trying to figure this out. And what we're going through, our transparency, our honesty, and our openness about our struggles and the things that we may be going through could potentially instill hope in others. Like, let's be people that when they look at us and we share our story, they go, man, I don't know how they're doing that. I don't know how they're handling that. I don't know. I don't even know. I would just want to quit. But man, there's something about them. Something about Kevin and Kim. There's something about Josh and Amy. There's something about Chase and Stacy. There's something that's happening, that the way they're handling the situation, man, I want to be like that. Like, where does your faith come from? Especially if they don't go to church and you have the opportunity to share how your faith is seeing you through something. Or if they are a believer, it may just increase their faith because they watch the way that you do it. And so our honesty and our openness can instill hope in others. The last idea is that I believe honesty and openness will enhance God's glory. That honesty and openness will enhance God's glory. Everything is for God's glory. The mess that you may find yourself in right now, the struggle that you find yourself in right now, at the end of the day, if we stay faithful and we continue to pursue Jesus, if we continue to keep our eyes on Jesus like we talk about often, keep our faith, keep pushing, keep praying, find ourselves maybe falling on the ground, praying and pouring our heart out to the Father the same way that Jesus did in the story, that at the end of the day, God's going to get the glory for this. You ever feel like that your life is sometimes like a game of chess or checkers, right? And like one move happens, and you don't know where the next move's coming, and you don't understand it, and then you understand 5 years down the road why God moved you here, or why God did this, or why that happened. But in the moment, you don't understand it at all. In the moment, you're like, why? Like when we first moved back from Orlando to Lakeland, we wanted to live on South Lakeland, could never find a house in South Lakeland, didn't want to live in North Lakeland, finally found a house in North Lakeland, and our whole lives changed dramatically because we ended up at a church that I gave my life to Christ with, and now look where we are. But at the time, we were frustrated because we didn't want to live in North Lakeland. We wanted to live in South Lakeland. But God had a better plan, and He was moving the piece on the board, making things happen the way that He wants to make things happen. I promise you that if you will continue to keep your eyes on Jesus, if you will continue to be open and honest and real with the Father, if you'll be open and honest and real with each other, that in the end of this, God is going to get the glory for whatever you're going through right now. But I really believe that we could be encouraged by the idea that we see a certain level of honesty and transparency in this prayer that Jesus is praying. I don't know about you guys, but it encourages me to know, maybe in this weird way, that Jesus was burdened too. Because I carry a lot of burdens, carry a lot of struggles, don't sleep that well all the time, right? Lots of stuff in my head and in my heart for my family and for our church and finances and all kinds of things. Just like you. But when we chose honesty as our second core value, it was more about this idea of let's be open, honest, and real with one another. Let's be open and honest and real with each other, and let's be open and honest with God. Let's be transparent. Let's not be fake. Let's not act like we got everything together when we don't, because to me, it's one of the whole points of church is we're just a bunch of messed up people trying to figure it out, right? That we need each other to lift each other up and help each other get through that, which is why we are in the process of having and putting together more connect groups so that we can do life with each other. We can spend time together more than just sitting in a couple rows on Sunday mornings. But when we chose honesty as our core value, I didn't really think about it from this aspect until I was studying this week. In that honesty and in that openness, that it begins with our prayer life. That if we can't be open and honest and real with the Father, then how in the world are we ever going to be open and honest with each other? Like Jesus is on his face before the Father, like asking for this cup to be taken from him. Like, God, there's got to be another way. Not your will, but my will. So I don't know what the struggle is this morning. I don't know what the worry is this morning. But I encourage you this week to be open and honest and real. But start with the Father. Then maybe your spouse or a friend, for those of us that aren't married, a parent, pastor, whatever. Like if you don't have somebody to be open and honest and real with and you need somebody, come see me after church and we'll meet. We'll set up a time to meet. No judgment. We just all need somebody to talk to. We do. Like don't be the guy or the lady over in the camp that goes, man, I don't need nobody. I don't need to talk to no one. I'll just deal with everything as myself. Like, I'm good. Like, don't be that person. But don't be over here either where you wear everybody out. You know who you could wear out? You could wear out your knees as you're lifting up your prayers and your worries and your struggles to the Father because He already knows them anyways. But we all need somebody to talk to. Like we do. And so this morning, I want to ask you to close your eyes and bow your heads for just a moment.